You're perfect.
Look at that. Good evening. Thank you all so much for coming. My name is Eric Swanson, and I am the Executive Director of Historic Waco. We are very excited to bring to you our spring lecture, which is all about museum collections. And I have behind me a panel of 4 amazing individuals who are way more intelligent than I am, and I'm going to tell you lots of the cool things that each one of their institutions has. Before we go any further, I just want to, again, thank you all for your support. Events like this, we are not able to do without your support, without you showing up. I also want to thank all of my Historic Waco volunteers. If you're a Historic Waco volunteer, give me a little hand. We get a round of applause for my They're truly incredible. Without them, Historic Waco would essentially cease to function. We just can't do what we do without the volunteers. If you would like to volunteer, we have a couple people outside that would love to give you some more information so you can do some cool stuff like this. So for tonight, the idea behind this lecture actually started because all of us up here have been to many, many museum conferences, and there's always at least one session that talks about just the really cool things and the challenging and difficult things that they have in the collections. It's essentially a safe space for all the collection people to get together and talk about, oh my gosh, I'm dealing with blank in my collection, it's really difficult, what advice do you have? And it's almost like a group therapy session, but essentially it's also educational. And it was something that I always thought was really fascinating, and I really was intrigued at the opportunity to bring this to our audience. It's just kind of a more behind the scenes look at something that you wouldn't normally see, because there's a lot more to museums than just the objects that are inside vitrines, inside those glass cases. And so these individuals are going to tell you essentially a lot more about that. So, and of course, I do want to thank all of the Mayborn staff as well. Tiffany Hines was the person who essentially got all this responsible. And then the McLennan County Historic Commission, Bobby and Clint over here, thank you both so much, super appreciate it for your support. And then, because you don't want to hear me talk, I'm going to introduce our 4 speakers. Each speaker is going to have about 15 to 20 minutes. They're each going to give their presentations, and then at the end, it will be open for questions for the whole group. And in no particular order, we have from the Dr. Pepper Museum, we have Rachel Nadeau Johnson. From the, actually, round of applause for that's way back. And then Anita Benedict from the Mayborn Museum. We have Eric Richard from the Texas Ranger Museum. And then, of course, we have Jeff Purtle from the Texas Collection at Baylor. So without further ado, I believe it is Anita who is speaking first.
All right, good evening, everyone. So my take on what we are going to kind of be presenting this evening is sort of like, what do we collect? How do we collect it? Like, what criteria do we use when somebody offers us something? What are things that we don't want?
Can I interrupt? Is the microphone turned on?
As far as yeah, it's on.
Okay, it just
Maybe
very
I don't
low
have it
light.
up close enough to my face.
That's better.
I will hold it up closer to my face. Okay, so let's see if I can do this right. This actually goes back here. Okay, so that's me, and just a little background. I came to Waco in 2000 to get my master's in museum studies and never left. I was here when we broke ground on this building, and I've been the collections manager officially with the title for about 20 years. So, wanted to start off with what our mission statement is. So, engaging our community and inspiring lifelong learning through our rich collections, vibrant programs, and hands-on experiences. And I wanted to point out, I put it in red that rich collections is the first thing that's in that list of stuff. And that's because without a collection, you don't have a museum. Some people might argue that with me, but it's what everything else is based off of. So when we are looking at accepting a donation. I can't accept a donation myself. I do not have the authority to do that. We have a collection committee, and it consists of my director, Charlie, my supervisor, Tom Haddad, myself, and then Sabrina and Tom, who are my staff, my direct reports. And the way it works is we put together the information that someone has called or emailed that they want to donate something. We gather all the pertinent information, and the committee reviews it. We usually have a meeting, we discuss it, and we make a determination on whether or not it is something we want or something that we don't want. And when we do that, if we don't want it for whatever reason, we do try to be helpful and try and recommend someplace else that may want it. And Charlie himself is the only one who can actually accept something on behalf of Baylor. So there's a form that he signs, and then once he does that, my staff and I are authorized to actually sign the deed of gift and go through the rest of the process. Okay, so what do we collect here? Well, as the name of our museum says, we are a natural and cultural history museum. This is updated numbers as of yesterday morning about our natural history collection. All told, I think it's something like 93,000 specimens, and some of those are lots, which can have anywhere from 2 to upwards of 50 or more specimens. This does not include all of the fossil material from the Waco Mammoth National Monument. We still have all of that, but it's now owned by the National Park Service, so I don't have it listed as ours. And it's okay. And I also wanted to point out the invertebrates and the plants are really very low. However, we have been inventorying. We have a very large, actually, insect collection, invertebrate collection. That's how we are working with our insects. And then we also, about a year and a half ago, we got Dr. Bob Aldridge's teaching collection from the biology department. And so far in the inventory, we're somewhere over 22,000 insects that we need to get catalog. And then in the next year to 2 years, we're supposed to take ownership of the herbarium on campus, and they've been digitizing their collection, and right now they're over 52,000 specimens. So those numbers are going to go up pretty significantly. We're not sure where we're going to put everything. Even if the insects are small, the cabinets take a lot of space. Okay, so when someone offers us a natural history specimen, what are we looking for? We're looking for stuff predominantly from Central Texas, though we do consider things from other areas. We have a lot of material from Mexico, and other examples, we did accept a mounted golden eagle that was actually from Montana, because you can't get those anymore. And we do have golden eagles in Texas. And we also want to make sure that it has good data. Where was it collected? When was it collected? Who collected it? That's very important. Without that, it's just a pretty bird, at least from a scientific standpoint. We would like it to be in good condition, but sometimes, if it's been on the road too long, but it's still a good specimen, we put it in the freezer and kill the ants. It needs to be legally acquired. When in natural history, back when we were looking at that, included fossils. If you go fossil collecting around Lake Waco, all that land belongs to the Army Corps of Engineers. I can't accept it, it belongs to them, even if you collect it. If you collect it on property you don't own, the landowner owns it. So we have to be careful about who we accept as the owner. Interesting fact, just not for those that may go to Canada someday. In Canada, it doesn't matter who owns the property, all fossils belong to the Crown. Interesting little fact. We also look at how much duplication and our storage space as far as the specimens. We do take multiple of the same species because we want to collect things that are from different areas over different time periods when it comes to the natural history, because things change. And if it is something that is a good specimen, but it doesn't have the appropriate data, sometimes we'll accept it and put it into our teaching collection, which we use for programming mostly. Okay, now our cultural history collections is predominantly archaeology, ethnography, and history. And the considerations for that, again, predominantly Central Texas. Now, I will qualify that our ethnographic collection, that includes our Native American material, but the rest of it is basically not from around here. Being Baylor and having been a collecting institution for 140 odd years, we have stuff from all around the world. We have not found new homes for that because we actually utilize that collection a lot in augmenting our traveling exhibits. For what we are actively collecting now, we like it to be Central Texas. Prior to 1900, that is the time period that we are working with here. Our village is 1880 to 1890. Now, Baylor history is the exception. Well, depending on what you have, we have much more recent Baylor history. Good provenience. If there's a good story behind it, Grandma brought it over on the ship. She had it her whole life, and you know that's great. We really like to know the history behind the objects. Condition is a little more important here. The duplication kind of runs into that, in that with historical objects, they don't. You have a sad iron. We have hundreds of sad irons. We have basically 2 of each kind. We don't have room to store a half dozen or more of every single type of sad iron that was ever made. So if we happen to get a sad iron that's in better condition than the one we currently have, but it's the same time period and the data is good, we may not keep the one that's in poor condition. And then we also accept things, we refer to them as uncatalogued donations. We still accession them and take ownership of them, but they may not have good data, but we can, that's how we got most of the stuff that's out in the village. When it's an uncatalogued donation, we don't track it. We make sure people understand that, and that particularly if it's out in the village, the public may be handling it, and in a couple of years it may get thrown away because it's too broken to utilize anymore. As long as the donor is okay with that, we'll go forward. If not, thank you very much, but we can't utilize it. Okay. So, the question of what do we need? How are we trying to grow our collection? Well, in general, anything that meets the criteria I just went over, we will consider. However, some of you might know that we are working on reigniting curiosity. It's a complete renovation of our permanent exhibit galleries. We are currently working on the early peoples right up in here, which is actually in the space behind the theater here, and what we refer to as the closet, which has been our big storage closet for the last 20 years. After that, we're going into ecology, then Baylor the world, and then phase 4 gets more into the land and fossil side of things. And there's also in there this little bit here about improving collection storage for researcher access. Basically, when they're going through the fundraising for all of these phases, there's a little kicker in there to try and improve the collection storage. So cultural crossroads is that first phase that I mentioned as far as what we're currently working on. If you've walked around the museum recently, you may have seen the log houses starting to come down. We're taking it apart, and we're going to put it all back together again. It'll look a little different, but that's going on now. Beginning in May, we're going to have a brand new grass house that the Wichita are going to come and construct for us in Lifeways. And then we'll have to physically lift it up and move it into where it's going to actually be in the new exhibit. So, and then we're going to reconstruct the log house. And and just a quick, this is kind of a timeline. We're hoping, going through all those phases, that next April, so a year and a month from now, we will be having a preview gala and opening of that phase of the renovation. One of the things that has come up with this, as we've been talking with our exhibit design firm, is we are kind of short on certain types of objects. And actually, it's not just objects, it's objects, stories, photographs. The kicker is that these things need to be pre-1900. And we don't have, but we're talking to as many people as possible. We need African American, Tejano, Anglo, Native American. So we're meeting with the tribal members, we're meeting with the chambers, we're meeting with other groups. But if I have to put something out there that we're looking for, that's it. And then when we get to the next phase, which is Texas ecology, and the phases that come after that, we may be sending out emails or announcements that, hey, we really could use photographs of this area, or we could use examples of that. So we're not sure, because we're just entering into the design phase for Texas ecology. And that's where my talk ends. Any questions? Okay, next.
Okay, I'll probably stay over here. Thanks everyone for being here tonight. My name's Jeff Pirtle, and I'm director of the Texas Collection, University Archives, and the W.R. Pogue Library here at Baylor. And if any of you have ever heard me speak before, there's one story that I would really like to tell, and I shared it quite a bit during our 100th anniversary of the Texas Collection last year. So I'm going to share that story again because it has it really resonates with the Texas Collection and what we're doing today. So the story goes that the Texas Collection began back in 1923 with a very generous donation from prominent Waco physician, Dr. Kenneth Ainsworth. So Dr. Ainsworth was well known in the Waco community, treated many Waco residents, and he was also an avid collector of all things Texas. So he collected original broadsides, newspapers, first edition volumes of Texas history, and really started accumulating this wonderful collection of Texana right here in his house in Waco. And as the story goes, it was either late 1922 or early 1923. It's cold outside. Dr. Ainsworth comes home from a long day at the office, seeing lots of patients. Walks in his home, and his wife is there in front of their hot blast furnace that was going full blast with a nice wood fire going. And she's sitting in front of it, throwing all of these rare manuscripts and broadsides into this hot furnace. And anyway, Dr. Ainsworth comes in, he says, "What's going on? What are you doing?" And she said, "This Texas stuff is starting to take over the house. Either it goes or me and the kids go. You choose." So it was right about that time that Dr. Ainsworth made a phone call to Baylor President Dr. Samuel Palmer Brooks and made an offer to create a Texas history library at Waco. And so that is the genesis of the Texas Collection, and continues to really define what we do to this day. So I always like sharing that little story. And I found that story a couple years ago in the oral history transcript from Guy B. Harrison. And Guy B. Harrison was director of the Texas Collection from 1928 all the way up until his retirement in 1969. So for 41 years, he was director of the Texas Collection. And I read that oral history transcript right when I started at the Texas Collection. So I started just a little over 2.5 years ago at Baylor. And I came to Baylor from the world of corporate archives. So I was at NBC Universal in Los Angeles, where in my last role there, I served as Director of Archives and Collections at NBC Universal. And then previous to that, I was the corporate archivist for J.C. Penney's corporate archives that was at their headquarters building up in Plano. And I was at NBC Universal for right about 20 years, and I was at J.C. Penney for about 4 years. And that J.C. Penney archive, it's now actually living at the DeGolyer Library at SMU. So that J.C. Penney archives was really interesting. It was a lot of the original ledgers, annual reports, James Cash Penney's correspondence, and it also included some old catalogs and wardrobe as well that was sold in the stores. But making the transition from corporate archives into academia has presented an opportunity for me to really refine some of my skills and become reacquainted with practices that were really non-existent in the corporate world when it came to collections. And for example, corporate collections are not open to external research. They exist to serve the company and internal corporate projects, so they were really self-serving collections. Whereas in academia, we're actively encouraging researchers, and we maintain a pristine reading room for Baylor students and faculty and outside patrons to really discover the rare collections that we maintain. And I hadn't monitored a reading room since I was in graduate school at Texas Tech, so that was something new to me. And then also fundraising and donor relations are also really important. That's a new endeavor for me within academia. Where in the corporate world, archive operations were mainly just considered as administrative overhead or a cost center, and we provided support to the revenue generating areas of the business. And I either reported up through corporate communications or administrative operations. Whereas in academia, we have a dedicated operating budget, and I also manage some endowment funds that have been generously donated and given to support our many activities and our collections at Baylor. And I'm going to be talking a little more about those endowments later in my presentation. But what I'm here to discuss tonight is mainly around collections development and acquisitions for the Texas Collection at Baylor, where in a corporate archive, all of our acquisitions were organic. They were all materials that were created by the company and maintained by the company, whereas in academia, acquisitions can come from a variety of sources. So we do maintain organically created collections in our university archives. So all of Baylor's university archives are considered organically created. And but we also accept material donations, and then we also purchase items that fall within our collecting scope. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about tonight, is collecting Texana at the Texas Collection at Baylor. So some factors to consider when bringing in collections is the mission, vision, core values, and strategic plan, not only for the libraries, but for Baylor University as a whole. Also, research trends amongst faculty, students, and visiting scholars. Of course, our available acquisitions budget and our endowments that we work with. The online accessibility and space limitations also play a major role in our decisions. And then also our collecting scope really rounds out the parameters on how we move forward with collecting Texana. So when it comes to the mission, vision, and strategic plan, Baylor just revealed a new strategic plan in September 2024, and this updated vision for the university really guides the university's growth as a whole through 2030, and it revolves around 4 commitments, which include equipping students to flourish, broadening interdisciplinary research and impact, building a vibrant, caring, and global community, and then, of course, demonstrating Christian stewardship. And it's within this new strategic plan that Baylor Libraries has also updated our strategic plan to align within these 4 commitments. So, for example, in equipping students to flourish, we're working with faculty to really integrate library resources into course planning. We're also creating new positions for student workers to work on campus in the libraries and special collections. And that plays into student retention as well. You know, the more students that are working on campus tend to stay enrolled in the university. And then under broadening interdisciplinary research and impact, we're also really planning to broaden the library's capacity to support Latin American studies, which includes acquiring more primary source materials related to Latin America. And this is one area that we're really looking to grow and develop our collection is around Texas and borderlands history. So these are a few recent acquisitions that we just made. There's some 1881 and 1846 Mexican government documents that really talk about the relationships with Texas during this time. And then this is also, this is that 1846 broadside that's right there. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention something else that we're moving forward with. Our outreach and instruction librarian, Sylvia Hernandez, is here. And we recently came across an 1858 atlas by a Mexican cartographer who was documenting all the maps and the border changes between Texas and Mexico in the 19th century. So I'm really excited about that acquisition. And then also, we're also actively collecting church history as well. So here's an 1884 Texas Baptist periodical from Crockett, Texas that we just recently acquired. So another area that we have, and I'm going to talk about this later, we also have a large collection of cookbooks. We have about 9,000 cookbooks. And so really documenting some of the Latin American influence that we have on Texan cuisine, that would also be a really welcome addition to our cookbook collection. So about the endowments that I was talking about. So when considering acquisitions to our collections, money is also always a consideration. And we're very blessed to have endowments for our acquisitions. And some of these endowments are really specifically focused. We have one endowment that we call the Biscuits and Gravy Endowment, and that sets aside funds specifically to acquire cookbooks and support events and activities centered around foodways. And so this is an example of one of the cookbooks in our collection, Cooking with Dr. Pepper, that we have in our collection. And then we also have the Francis C. Pogue Endowment that's dedicated to maps. So we also have a great map collection. And then there's another endowment that is specifically for Waco history as well. So we do have a little bit of money to make acquisitions when it comes to preserving and maintaining the history of Waco within our collection as well. And then something else that we're always interested in acquiring, you know, I mentioned some of what we're doing with the research trends, and we're also working with professors to really get a better idea of some of the things that we could incorporate within their teaching. And so we're always receptive to their input about our acquisitions and use some of these endowments to help purchase some of those. So, you know, I showed some of those maps documenting Texas and Mexico borderlands. There's a new history professor. That's really her area of interest. And then Sylvia, who I mentioned earlier, she's also been working with history professor Dr. Ricardo Alvarez Pimentel where they actually developed a class around the Mexican-American experience in Waco and using primary sources within our collection for that class. And then we have a research fellow that's here this week who's with us from the University of Cambridge in the UK, and he's diving into a lot of our Baptist documents documenting Christian nationalism during the Cold War. So it's been a lot of fun to get faculty input on our collections and how we utilize our endowments as well. So I also mentioned online accessibility and space limitations. So this is our building that's on the Baylor campus. This is the Carroll Library. And with any special collections library, storage space is always a factor that must be considered before taking on any acquisitions. Our primary materials are all stored in this building, and then we also have overflow storage in Morrison Hall, which is Baylor's old law school building that's right on 5th Street, and it had a built-in area for the former law library that we utilize for our overflow storage. And taking into consideration our ever-growing collections, Baylor Libraries now also prioritizes ebook acquisitions over print for any new materials that are coming out. So we're also knee-deep in some projects, really de-accessioning some of the out-of-scope materials and duplicate print materials that take up so much space within our collections. And then within our archival collections, we also must consider online availability of material before we acquire any original items. And one example of this is I was really hoping that we had some primary source material documenting that 1865 order from General Granger marking the end of slavery in Texas in Juneteenth, because we really wanted to highlight some of that material for Juneteenth this year. But unfortunately, we couldn't find much of anything that was original to 1865, and so I reached out to some rare book and manuscript dealers to see if they had any primary source documentation about Juneteenth. And unfortunately, nobody could find anything, but one dealer did say, "Oh my gosh, you won't believe this, we just had a newspaper come up for sale from the New York Daily Tribune from July of 1865 that gives an excellent account of General Granger's order in Galveston." So the first thing that I did was look online, and sure enough, the Library of Congress has that entire issue digitized and available. So I wasn't about to go pay, I think he was wanting $8,500 for it, and so I didn't want to make that purchase when this content was easily available online. And then I'll also take into consideration other repositories that are within a manageable drive from Waco. So if materials that we consider adding exist over at UT Austin or UT Arlington or A&M or SMU, I'll likely pass if it's within a day's drive of us as well. So within our collecting scope, so the Texas collection is rich in materials when it comes to documenting early pioneers and expansion into Texas. Some of our most used collections include the Jack and Gloria Parker Selden collection. And this is a photograph, it's a cabinet card that's within that collection of Cynthia Ann Parker and Prairie Flower, the mother of Quanah Parker, of course. And this documents the activities of the Parker family, their part in Texas history. And we have many family papers documenting the settlement, growth, and hardship of pioneers. And then also as a traditional Baptist institution, we have papers of missionaries that were based in Texas, that were sent all over the world documenting their experience of sharing the gospel. So these are just another few jewels within our collection. This is a portrait of Sam Houston painted by Henry McArdle, who was a prominent Texan artist. He was actually an art professor at Baylor when it was located in Independence between 1845 and 1886. And then, of course, here's a legislative manual from the Texas House of Representatives. I think this one dates to 1879. And then, of course, we also have what are really valuable, considered streeter items. So there was a gentleman by the name of Thomas Streeter who was a East Coast Yankee. He lived up in Connecticut. I think his offices were in New York City. And in the early 20th century, he had a lot of investments in Texas oil in the early 20th century. And he became fascinated with Texas history. And much like Dr. Kenneth Ainsworth, he started collecting all materials that he could get his hands on, documenting the history of Texas between 1795 through the Republic period of 1845. And so we have a number of materials that are considered streeter items because he listed all these items in his bibliography. And so we have some very valuable streeter items that are within our collection. And Streeter actually visited Baylor, I believe, in 1941 and donated a few items to our collection. So something else I wanted to discuss is that we're also, and Anita touched on this a little bit in her presentation, that we're also greatly interested in filling any archival silence of underrepresented groups within our collection, which includes documentation from indigenous tribes around Texas, as well as the Hispanic and Black experience in our state. And we do have some excellent collections, namely the Jules Bledsoe collection, who was a prominent opera singer in the early 20th century, born and raised in Waco. We have his papers at the Texas collection. We also have a great collection of the Farmers Improvement Society. Farmers Improvement Society was a collective farming operation that was predominantly African American communities within Central Texas, which they formed. And then also, I'm also now director of the W.R. Pogue Library, and we have a wonderful collection of political materials at the Pogue Library. So this, of course, is W.R. Pogue, who represented this district for over 40 years, from late 30s up through the late 70s. We have all of his papers at the W.R. Pogue Library. We have all of Congressman Chet Edwards' papers at the Pogue Library. And we also have Lieutenant Governor Bob Bullock's, all of his papers at the Pogue Library. And as I mentioned it earlier, we're currently hosting the history class about the Mexican-American experience in Waco. And some of the primary source material that we're basing that class upon are records from the Urban Renewal Agency, which really displaced a lot of the Hispanic population here in Waco in the 1960s and 70s. So we're always on the lookout for more material documenting minority groups and multiple perspectives on historic events, and as well as Texas politics at the Pogue Library. So, last but not least, the collecting perspective that I shared with you today, it really is being refined and formalized into a larger Baylor Libraries Collections Development Plan. A committee's been formed, and this vision of developing our collection to the best serve our patrons will be included in it. But at the end of the day, it's these photographs that really inspire what our collections are about, and it's the ability to introduce primary source materials to students and really spark a lifelong love of history and material culture. So I'm really grateful to Dr. Kenneth Ainsworth and especially his wife Maud, who inspired that original donation in 1923, and happy that we're continuing to grow and develop our collections. Thanks.
I'm Rachel Nady Johnson. I'm the collections manager at the Dr. Pepper Museum. I am originally from Michigan. I came to Waco in 2012 to get my master's in museum studies at Baylor, and have been working in collections of the Dr. Pepper Museum for about the last 12 years now. Wow, Dr. Pepper looks really weird in the caption, so sorry. If there's anything I want you to take away from tonight, is that there is no period in Dr. Pepper, just so we're clear. It hasn't been since the 50s. So a little bit about Dr. Pepper Museum. We're a private nonprofit. We're not owned or operated by Dr. Pepper's parent company, Keurig Dr. Pepper. We opened to the public on May 11th, 1991. And since then we have steadily increased in visitation. Our visitation last year was 256,000 people. And we're increasing this year as well. We actually celebrated reaching our 3 millionth visitor last year. So that was a really exciting milestone. We operate out of 2 historic buildings. The building in the front of the photo is the Artesia Manufacturing and Bottling Company. It's on the National Register as the home of Dr. Pepper. It was built in 1906 specifically to bottle Dr. Pepper. And then the building across the courtyard from it with that Dr. Pepper neon sign on it is the Killam Rotan building, which, although if you're driving down the street and you look at them, it looks much newer. It's not. It's actually older than Dr. Pepper. Dr. Pepper was invented in 1885. That building was built in 1882. So it's been there for a while. So that's a little bit about our campus. And I will say that the Artesia Manufacturing and Bottling Company is actually considered part of our collection. So it's our biggest collections piece, by far. On site, we have approximately 250,000 objects. It covers a range of things that I'll talk about later. But we have 2 primary collections. We have our permanent collection, which we own and control, and then we also have Keurig Dr. Pepper's collection on repository, which means it lives on site and we take care of it. Our mission at the Dr. Pepper Museum is that we educate, inspire, and entertain by sharing stories of Dr. Pepper and the soft drink industry. So our collection directly supports our mission. Here you can see our temporary exhibit gallery, which right now has an exhibit called The World of Fizz. That's about international sodas, and we have our education manager flying a group of students around the world to see different sodas. And so without our collection and the depth that our collection has, we wouldn't be able to reach our mission. So what does that mean? Like, what did we collect? We have a collection scope, which kind of is a parameter for what we collect. So we have permanent ownership of objects and archives, which document, reflect, and aid in understanding and interpretation of the soft drink industry throughout the world, with an emphasis on Dr. Pepper and its associated brands in North America. Dr. Pepper has a lot of associated brands. Keurig Dr. Pepper has something like 150 brands in their portfolio. We don't collect all of those. We stick to the soda side, whereas they call it the cold side, and we're not looking into collecting the hot side or the coffee side. So what does that mean we collect? A lot of people think we have a lot of bottles and cans, which we do. Don't you worry, we have a lot. Something like 15,000 bottles. But there's also a lot of other things that we have as well. As you might imagine, there's a lot of advertisements that go along with soda. We have all kinds of advertisements, from really tiny ones to very large ones. We have a lot of framed artwork. We have a lot of original artwork. A lot of advertising, especially when these companies started advertising, was all hand-drawn or painted. And so we have a lot of original artwork as well. For example, Crush had some paintings, advertisements that they had a painter come up with, Gil Elfgren, who is a pretty big pinup artist, but he also did advertising as well. And so we have some of those in the collection, and other artwork as well. We also have a lot of different awards that the company has won, or awards that they've given out, or awards that people have gotten from the company. There's a lot of different merchandise and giveaways. There's a lot of pens and pencils and pins and like all types of tiny things that the company has given away to promote their brand. We also have some big things. We have bikes. We have a stationary bike for Diet Right. So it kind of fits, right? We have some mountain bikes for like Dr. Pepper and 7-Up, and then Diet Right has this stationary bike. We have all different kinds of large things, but my personal favorite are the 2 go-karts we have in the collection. One is just like a regular Dr. Pepper go-kart, but the other was designed for a sweepstakes, and it was supposed to look like a Land Cruiser from Star Wars. That's Dr. Pepper on it. That one's currently on display if you come to the museum. So yes, we have a lot of Dr. Pepper stuff, but as far as associated brands, we also have an extremely large collection of 7-Up, Canada Dry, A&W. We have a lot of soda, to name a few. So what we're currently collecting are more unique items, specifically items that tell individual stories. We're really interested in being able to tell people's stories and how they've been connected to the various drinks over the years. For example, we recently got in a donation from a woman whose father worked for the company for decades. And then her entire family at some point or another worked for the company as well. And so she donated some of her father's items. And so we're able to include those personal stories. Dr. Pepper, obviously, is still a very large living brand. Stuff is always coming out, so we're also collecting modern items as well. It's a lot easier to collect them today than years down the road, because we know how they're being preserved. So I love that Eric gave us the prompt of talk about your collection and go in it any direction you want, and we've all sort of picked different directions. So you'll get a little bit of something different. One of the things I wanted to show you all was a sneak peek at our new temporary exhibit that will be opening this summer. It will be taking over the World of Fizz area, and it will be called Wildly Refreshing, the Animal Appeal in Soda Advertising. We have a lot of really fun ads with animals on them, and we wanted to do something fun for this exhibit. Our temporary exhibits usually last a year or 2. World of Fizz has lasted 2 years, and that was a really fun exhibit. We wanted to follow it up with something fun as well, and we don't often get to show off all of the various animal advertising that we have, and there's a lot of it, so we're super excited about this exhibit. These 2 pieces are from the 1960s. They're sort of like circus themed. There's a lot of circus themed things in the 60s. There's also a creepy clown that goes with them, but I'm not showing that off to you today. That's not part of the exhibit. We also, 7-Up has some really fun advertising, especially from like the 40s and 50s. And a ton of it's animal themed, and they have a lot of holiday advertising. These 2 7-Up ads would actually sit on the neck of a 7-Up bottle as an advertisement. They're called bottle riders. And they have a ton of artwork. It's super fun. And then we have these 2 little trays. They're called pin trays. And so what these trays are, any company could write, in the early days of advertising, in like the early 1900s, any company could write to certain companies and ask to have their name put on the same type of advertisement. So this one has Drink Dr. Pepper. I've also seen like shoe brands on these same pin trays. So it's just very interesting. It wasn't specific to the company at all, except their name was on it. And they're cute. In Keurig Dr. Pepper's collection, we also have Rose Parade floats, or the diagrams of their floats. We do not have the whole float. That would take up way too much room. But for decades, they participated having a float in the Rose Parade. Their most recent float in the parade was in 2023, I believe. But we have a lot of their diagrams, and a lot of them have animals for whatever reason. There's a Dr. Dolittle one. The goat one in the corner is called Kids at Play. So, haha. So some of these will go out for the exhibit, and we don't often have a chance to display these. They are very large and cumbersome. They don't go in a lot of our exhibits, so we're excited that these are going to get to go out. So with any museum, you see about 5 to 10% of their collection out at any given point in time. And so with our temporary exhibits, we're able to showcase different parts of our collection and more unique parts of our collection. And then I have just some other parts of our collection that I wanted to show you as well. This is a staff favorite, a fan favorite. It is the model, it's a model of the Old Corner Drugstore. The Old Corner Drugstore is where Dr. Pepper was invented. And this is a model made out of an ostrich egg. It is a very detailed model. Its windows open up, its doors open up, you open it up, you see a little Dr. Pepper dispenser. The Dr. Pepper dispenser is made out of a smaller egg. Oh, the top opens up. It's a very intricate piece. Someone spent a lot of time on this. And so we have a lot of fan art in our collection. This is what we call it, are these pieces of art that people have made because they love the drink. We don't collect all of the fan art because there's a lot of it, but we do collect some more unique pieces and fun pieces that can help us tell the story of Dr. Pepper and other drinks. These are similar to the pin trays, but they're actually Venetian art plates, which are large collector's pieces. And again, this is the same thing where a company could send off and say, hey, I want this style plate, I want our name on it, and they would get it back. And so there's several ladies on plates with the Dr. Pepper name. There's also a plate that's roses with the Dr. Pepper name, and then Dr. Pepper and Circle A Company opened together in the Artesia Manufacturing and Bottling Company. They were owned by the same group for many years. And they actually commissioned a different piece. So that's what you see here, is a piece they commissioned with the Circle A name on it. It has an image of the Cotton Palace here in Waco. And it shows off 3 of their most popular brands at the time: Circle A Ginger Ale, Circle A Soda Water, and Circle A Celery Champagne. And I wish I could say celery wasn't a popular flavor, but it was. They had many brands, but they also had Circle A Aqua Lithia, which was lithiated water, which was also very popular at the time. When 7-Up was originally released, it also had lithium in it. Another fan favorite here, we have our toothbrush in a bottle. This is a bottle of RC that was bottled in 1967 or 1969 with a toothbrush in it. So people used to send their bottles back in, they would be washed, they would be refilled, they would be sent back out. And it worked really well, except for large items. If people shoved large items into the bottles, they did not wash out in the washing process. In theory, people were inspecting these bottles. In practice, some bottles made it out with random things in it. This bottle has a toothbrush. We've also seen like plastic baggies, little toys, like little army men, little toy turtle, a straw, which is the one that makes the most sense. But it happened. Someone even contacted me saying they had a bottle of Dr. Pepper that had nail clippers in it. So, it's a thing that happened on occasion. My favorite part about this toothbrush, though, is everything is still intact. The bristles are completely intact. So it's kind of amazing that it's been sitting in cola for decades, and it is still intact. We also have some kind of weird things in the collection. Dr. Pepper and other brands have tried a lot of different things over their history, some of which worked really well, some of which did not. So in the 60s, Dr. Pepper came out with a high-protein energy drink called Hustle. It did not last very long. I think it's probably ahead of their time because that's like all the rage these days, right? They also had a sports drink that they came out with in the mid-90s. And it's called Nautilus, like the exercise company, because it is exactly like the exercise company. So Nautilus went into bankruptcy, and to help get out of that, they licensed their name for other products to other companies. And so Dr. Pepper's Nautilus was born with that. It did not last very long. There were a lot of issues with it. But it is kind of amazing that a couple decades later, it's still this bright color. And we also have a lot of more contemporary objects in the collection. Dr. Pepper and other brands are always coming up with new promotions. One of the big things that the soda companies do is product placement and product promotion, where either the products are in the movies or on the TV shows, or they're advertising for them, or both. And so a big thing Dr. Pepper has been a part of are the various Marvel movies. So we have a lot of Spider-Man stuff in the collection. It's pretty cool. We have this big Spider-Man cutout, who can be kind of scary, depending on where he gets moved in the collection. We have a lot of cans from these various promotions. Here's a Red Fusion can, which was the first flavor line added to Dr. Pepper, and it's, at that point in time, 120-something year history. And it was like a cherry I don't know exactly what it tasted like. What I'm told it tasted like is a cherry drink with like an essence of Dr. Pepper. It did not last very long, but now we have Dr. Pepper Cherry, so all is right with the world. But they had a lot of promotions with movies and different things with this drink specifically because they were trying to capture the youth market. We also have a lot of ads that help us expand on different topics, this specifically World War II. So these 7-Up ads show what the original 7-Up ad looked like with Fresh Up, and then how they changed it once the US entered World War II. 7-Up completely switched their advertising campaign to buying war bonds, and several drink companies did that as well. It also allows us to talk about things like sugar rations. We also have some unique objects in our collection. I'm going to show you 2 of them. One of them is a bit of a jump scare, so sorry, there's a gnome. On loan to us, we have this very impressive bottle cap horse. He was created for an anniversary event for Neiman Marcus, and he is a horse. He is the size of a horse. If you know horses, he's about 15 hands tall. He is made from tile grout, Dr. Pepper bottle caps, and Dr. Pepper cans, all in like a fiberglass horse situation. So he's pretty cool. Very difficult to move, but he's pretty cool. And then one of the more niche brands that Keurig Dr. Pepper owns is Verner's Ginger Soda, which is from Michigan, and it's actually older than Dr. Pepper. Dr. Pepper is our oldest major national soft drink, but Verner's is the oldest national soft drink with a creation date of 1866. But anyway, his little mascot, Verner's mascot, is a gnome. And this is a gnome from the 1920s from the Verner's factory. His mouth would move and his eyes would move, and he had like an audio track that would have played behind him because they had many gnomes there that gave tours. So he's there. He doesn't really make it out, so you're some of the few people who have been able to see our wonderful Verner's gnome. All right. With that, we'll go to Eric.
Hello, everyone. Can everyone put their hands up for real fast? Shake them. Now you're awake. So I'm Eric Bashar. I'm the Collections Manager of Texas Ranger Hall of Fame Museum. A little bit about me. I've been working in museums since about 2019. I started at the Texas Tech Museum out in Lubbock. A little more windy out there than it is here. I've been working for several museums across the North Texas area and ended up here about 3 years ago. So, let's see. Perfect. So, a little about the Ranger Museum. Our official founding date is 1964. That right there is the first artwork of museum's concept back in 1963. We today are about 10,000 artifacts and about 20,000 archival materials, which includes everything from Ranger records, books, movie posters, those kind of things. Our annual visitorship last year was about 70,000, a little slow for Waco, but our majority of our audience comes outside of Waco. Here around 35, it's very convenient. Sorry. Excuse me. Today, let me talk about our collection a little more. So this is some artifacts in our current collection right now. I'm going to talk about this first one up here in the top left. This is the Madam of Waco. This is Molly Adams, who at one point operated one of the largest brothels in Waco, right off 2nd Street. Her name's actually Mary. She was an immigrant from the New York area. If you're ever curious to look up her census records, she has a lot of boarders in the 1890s, who at one point are also listed as actresses. In fact, that's where the term actress on 2nd Street came for anyone who was looking for the red light district in Waco. We have her as an example of vice. Since we are the Ranger Museum, we deal with both criminals and law enforcement. We also have Ranger equipment, such as this pistol right here. This is called a Colt Walker. It got its name from a Ranger actually by the name of Captain Walker, who was a Ranger in the 1840s. He helped design this pistol alongside Samuel Colt, And so Colt decided to name it after him in his honor. In fact, it's actually currently the state pistol of Texas, if anyone's curious. We also don't just have firearms and ranger equipment, we also have musical instruments. This right here is a violin that came to us about a year or two back that belonged to Captain George Baylor, a relative of the Baylor family, of found Baylor here, of course. He carried this with him through the West Texas area when he was captain out in El Paso for many years. It is said he was both a fighter and a fiddler, and good at both. We also, since we do have not just Ranger history, but also pop culture, the Rangers have a big impact on the United States culture as a whole. So we also have things such as this G.I. Joe toy here, right here, which is also called Texas Ranger Manhunt. We also have things such as, for instance, everyone knows the Ranger baseball team up in the Dallas area. We have baseball artifacts. We also have stuff from the New York Ranger hockey team. A little known fact, they were founded by a gentleman by the name of Tex. So Press started calling his hockey team Texas Rangers, and so the name stuck. So now it's called the New York Rangers. Now we still do collect everything like this, like up here. Oh, go back. There we go. We still collect artifacts that are mostly Ranger-centric. So that includes things such as equipment Rangers have used, documents on Rangers history, documents on Rangers life as a whole. We also collect pop culture like the G.I. Joe here, and also things including movies. Everyone knows about the Lone Ranger and Walker, Texas Ranger. Both of those are well represented in our collections today. So, collections policy. Everyone here is kind of familiar about now how most other museums here work on that. So we do the same thing in our museum like Anita does, where we have a collections committee. It's made up of myself and several other staff members, where we discuss artifacts that are offered to us on a very regular basis, whether we like to take them or not. We currently focus on, right now, Ranger equipment. So for instance, this badge right here, this is the oldest known Ranger badge from the 1880s. Belonged to a company of Rangers under Captain Ira Ayton. We do also have things like I said, pop culture, artifacts, stuff like that. So we do actually still collect sports equipment, movie posters, movie props, those kind of things. What we don't want is such as this example right here. We have some items in the collection that kind of predate our current collections policy and are kind of outside our scope now. This is a Flemish crossbow from the 1540s. No Rangers existed in the 1540s, so we would not need this. So we do have some other odds and ends that we are currently working on finding good homes for. We often have our own de-accession policy, like most museums, and so we offer them to other institutions who have a better need for them than us. Ranger history only goes back to the 1820s to now, so this is kind of outside of our scope. So one of the challenges for us is since we are documenting an active law enforcement agency, there's always new history happening. This right here is the latest class of new Rangers, often referred to as New Ranger School, from last year, from this January actually. The Rangers on average have about 10 individuals come in, about 10 individuals retire every year. People always ask me, are there still Rangers? Yes, there are. There's 187 as of last week. They're currently allowed up to 190 by the Texas legislature. The other, of course, problem for us is limited space, like most museums. We only have so much space to go around, so we have to be very picky in what we can and can't accept. My largest artifact is a horse trailer, which is kind of permanently on display since we can't really move it through the building well. Of course, we also have artifacts as tiny as badges and coins and such like that. So we do have to be very picky what we accept. The other thing is our building, being majority from the 1960s, is rather dated by this point. And so we do have to keep up with the building as we have to keep up with the collections. The other thing is documentation. So since our museum is quite old at this point, some of our documents are not the best from the early days, so we have to work back retroactively and put together records and such going back to the 1960s. And today I try to keep an active documentation of artifacts now. So that works now is to say, for instance, when someone donates something, we have a legal document that says who donated it, when they donated it, what is it, all those 9 yards. And it helps us for the future, so when either myself or someone after me comes back with those collections, goes, okay, it was accepted on this day by this person, now I know who to get back at. It's usually me. Something I like to talk about with facts is collection safety. People don't think about what kind of items might be in a collection that might be dangerous to individuals on the staff. Now, I'm sure me and some of my peers here have done this in the past, has looked at what do we have that might be problematic. So for us, our biggest collection of range equipment, of course, is firearms, such as this Thompson right here. And so a lot of firearms are offered to us in several manners of use. And so often they come to us loaded, which we do have to be very careful about, especially with muskets. People kind of forget to unload muskets. And so we have invested in equipment to properly take care of artifacts such as firearms when they come in. This right here is our safe full of live ammunition, which is nice and coarse concrete and steel. So if anything goes off, I won't know about it for a couple days. We do have a bunch of aging ammunition and such, so it stays in there. We do have a couple individuals that we work with to deactivate such ammunition so we can properly display it for the public and for their safety. Another thing I've talked about is film, such as this roll right here. This is actually from a kid's toy to show you a short little film on a little cowboy chasing some individuals across the desert. Now film, I'm sure if someone appears to encounter this, such as nitrate film, can be quite self-explosive, self-igniting. So we have to constantly test all our film to make sure none of it is in fact nitrate film. Luckily this one is not nitrate film, that's why I have a picture of it. We also have taxidermy collection. There are a lot of taxidermies that predate current taxidermy standards that have hazardous materials in them. Most of this was so bugs wouldn't eat it, of course. Now we're not bugs, but they're much bigger, but it still hurts us, so we take precautions on those kind of things. And so all our taxidermies, such as Buddy and Moose right here, are very well taken care of and are kept on a regular basis of monitoring. Where did we get? No, that's kind of it. Any questions? Great.
So was there anyone for any of our panelists that you had a question about? In the back.
So the lady who spoke about the Mayborn Museum, when you talked about the giant storage closet, can you think of something that you really wish you had on display, but that there's just not a place for it right now?
People always ask me if I have a favorite thing to, in the collection, and I always really tell them no, I don't. So, honestly, one of the things that we're trying to get prepared so that we could display it, because my background, actually, I came into museums from doing fossil work, both excavating and preparing, and if you've been in our exhibit in Cretaceous Sea, we have that big fin of our pliosaur, and that pliosaur, I have like 5 or 6 jackets the size of your dining room table and number of boxes of material, and we're really trying to get that all prepared so that I don't know that it could be mounted, but it could be used to, we've even talked about having like a hologram display of it, so it could be in 3 dimensions. So if I could do that, that would be pretty awesome, I think.
Thank you.
I have a question for Anita. You used to have boxes that you would check out to the schools. Do you still have those? And because when you mentioned using some of your items for teaching materials.
Honestly, we do not.
Okay.
That was part of the education over there, and yes, over the years we did supply them with things, but keeping up with them and getting them returned and having to check them in and go through everything and restock them, it got to be way too much.
Okay.
And so we actually stopped that probably close to 10 years ago.
Okay.
But historic Waco does have teaching material, and we'll send a teacher. A lot of our volunteers were teachers in Waco, but we have a lot of material. If you're looking for Waco history or history of the indigenous people.
These were primarily science oriented because my wife was a science teacher. And so she would check out every year before kids got out of school the snake and reptile box. So the kids, before they went wherever, they would be familiar with what the poisonous snakes were, what the venomous snakes were, and those kinds of things. And so, but there were lots of fascinating boxes. You had fossils.
We had probably about like 24 of them, and that
Yes,
was one
yes.
reason it was so hard to keep up with.
Sure.
And, we only had one of each, and so it was really a serious first come, first served
Right,
situation. I wasn't responsible for those. I don't know what the whole, other than it took a lot of staff time.
Sure.
I think that was probably why they stopped with them.
Okay.
Actually, a question for you, Eric. Historic Waco, you have a collection, correct?
We do.
Yes, and so who manages that? Is that you, or do you have a committee? And is there some overlap with Baylor and the Texas collection?
That's a great question. So like a few of the organizations I wasn't expecting to answer a question. This is great. So Historic Waco, we also have a collections committee. Actually, Jeff and Rachel are also on our committee as well. Historic Waco and historic house museums are a little different because one of the fundamental challenges, and really one of the cool things about historic house museums, is a lot of the objects that you have are just sort of permanently on display. It's essentially a snapshot in time when you're going through all the house collections. So we don't really have a big collection space. We don't have a big archive space like a lot of these institutions. So much of the stuff that we have is actually in our attic upstairs, which you don't have to be an expert in collections to know that you probably should not have collections materials up in an attic. Not super great place for it. And so that's why really a long-term goal for Historic Waco, and this is something that Historic Waco actually was thought about in the early 2000s, is to get funds to get us a dedicated collections building. So we can collect more stuff. We can also rotate things off and on exhibits. In terms of who actually does all of this, so the collections committee that essentially we meet every other month for advice. Right now, Historic Waco does not have a set curator on staff. But essentially, it's a little bit of myself and then one of my other staff members, Daniel. So we're the ones who usually do that. But great question, thank you.
Yeah, this is for everybody on the panel. Have any of you ever received any items where you really had to question the authenticity, and what type of research have you had to do to actually come up with the correct answer to that?
The first thing that comes to mind for me is we have a small two-spouted pot that looks very much like something from Peru. What happened was that apparently a woman walked in the front door of the museum, set it on the counter, turned around and walked away. Didn't talk to anybody, nothing about it, don't know who she was. And when they gave it to me it had all the markings of being fake. Parts of it were, it actually has kind of almost a plastic feel to it. But I've also had people who study Peruvian pottery look at it and they're like, well, I don't know. I don't know what to do with it because technically we don't own it because no one actually donated it. So I'm kind of stuck with that right now.
What Anita said, there are a lot of doorstep donations, what we call them, where people just leave things, sometimes just setting them at admissions or literally leaving them on your doorstep while you're closed. And those are always difficult because we don't know who owns them, and so we have to follow Texas abandoned property law to process those.
Earlier I was talking about George Baylor's violin. That actually does a lot of research to prove that we were at least 99% sure that it is in fact George Baylor's violin. We actually got rather lucky on that. In fact, I actually reached out to Texas Collection about this not too long ago. We found a picture of Baylor holding the violin in 1917. Apparently his daughter said, I want a picture before he died. He goes, fine, but I'm going to hold my violin before I die as well.
So I really don't have any stories from my 2.5 years in Baylor at the Texas Collection, but I've got a lot of stories from being director of archives and collections at NBC Universal, and some of the items that would come across either for auction. There's a lot of nefarious dealers when it comes to Hollywood memorabilia and claiming that materials were worn in a certain movie, or like Dorothy's ruby slippers, that kind of thing. There's so many items that come up for auction that are not authentic, especially in that world of Hollywood, where it's really tough to prove any provenance whatsoever. Or there was a costume that was in the costume department, and it was altered and used for another film, and then altered back, and it gets really confusing. One specific story I recall is that there was a 1931 Bela Lugosi Dracula one-sheet movie poster that came up for auction, and the estimate for it to sell was $250,000, and so it was considered one of only two in existence. So an original 1931 Bela Lugosi Dracula poster. Well, come to find out, that poster that was being sold for $250,000, some guy had actually taken a 1931 movie poster that, it was that old, actually. It's almost 100 years old. And he had gotten steel wool and sort of erased that lithograph print that was on that old paper, and then followed the exact poster producing processes back then and did a silkscreen lithograph of that Dracula poster. And I mean, that thing looked legit, real, mint condition. And it was later determined that, that thing was a fake, and I think that guy ended up going to prison. So, I could go on with people. But, any other questions?
Yes, the Dr. Pepper Museum, do you keep any of the film from some of those early great Dr. Pepper commercials on TV? I'm thinking my two favorites were the we're all out of Dr. Pepper Big Daddy, and I can't remember if his name was the great dancer David Naughton or Cliff Naughton. I mean, those things, they've just stuck with me all these years. Are there copies of those that you have?
Yes, so we have copies of a lot of the films for Dr. Pepper commercials and other brands as well. Those are all part of Cured Dr. Pepper's collection, and we're actually working through a process of getting all of those digitized so it's easier for people to access them. But we do have a lot of the I'm a Pepper commercials with David Naughton already digitized, and a lot of other ones that are already digitized as well.
So visitors could see them.
Mm-hmm.
Just to mention, when I was getting my master's, I worked at the Dr. Pepper Museum and was cataloging kind of behind the scenes, and at that time they had a television screen and it continuously played Dr. Pepper commercials, and that's all I was hearing for 8 hours every Saturday when I was working. David Naughton, loved the guy, thought he was as cute as could be when I was younger, but I got really tired of listening to him.
Yeah, some of those just like sink into your soul and you can't get them out, right?
So I have one comment and one question for the group, and then we can all head out for cookies and snacks. Anita, can people come out and look at these objects that you pulled?
Yes, well, I just pulled a few things from the collection upstairs just almost right before we started this little get together tonight, but if you'd like to come up and take a look, I'll stand up here and try and answer questions, though they're pretty self-explanatory.
And then for each panelist, you mentioned a lot about collection scope and policy, things you accept and things you want. If people have objects, how do they get in contact with you?
There is a form on our website. Please fill out the form and we will get back to you. That is the best way to get a hold of us. Also, as you're leaving, I have some stickers on the table if you'd like some stickers.
For us, we don't have a form online, but if you come to the museum or if you call in, someone will either give you the form to fill out or they will fill it out over the phone, and that is forwarded to me, and then I will reach out to you and ask for more information.
if you want to reach out to me, just call our front desk at our museum, and they'll get you in touch with me. If not, I also have some business cards on me. Also, if you ever do any research at our archival space, if you go to our website, we do a form in there you can fill out if you want to do research yourself or have us do research on your behalf.
I actually forgot because I don't have a whole lot to do with it. I just get the emails. We also have asked the collection staff a question. So if it's not just about a donation, you can do donation information that way, but if you have something and you're trying to identify it and you think we might be able to help, we will do the best we can.
We also have something similar. There's another form on our website if you have questions about the collection that you can reach out to us and we'll get back to you.
Yeah, and I'll just direct you to the Texas Collection and University Archives website. We have a section that's on there that's about donations, and we just ask that you send an email to TXCOLL, TXCOLL, @baylor.edu. And we also have some of our parameters around our donations and things we're not accepting as well. We've got plenty of Baylor yearbooks, so we're not accepting any of those. So.
Well, thank you all so much for coming. Thank you to our panelists. One last round of applause. And thank you, Ron, for reporting. We appreciate that. And please make your way outside, and we're going to have some refreshments.